As Camilo told you, this is part of the Enable project, which is a Ford Foundation grant. And I'm just going to read our grant language. The training is brought to you by the Enable project, a coalition that brings together nonprofit and social justice organizations and their staff to create channels for integration of people with disabilities within their organizations and movements. This training is designed to guide organizations on how to integrate and include people with disabilities in ongoing civic engagement. Doing so can empower people with disabilities to take advantage of their rights and participate in social justice and political movements. As a society, we all benefit when everyone is able to participate and contribute. And the organizations we're working with are Catalyst Miami, the Center for Independent Living of South Florida, the Advocacy Network on Disabilities, and my organization, Disability Independence Group.
Good morning, Bob.
Morning there, big man. Morning, Alice!
There's no need to be awkward.
Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention! Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping?
I got you.
Wait, ah! Oh no, might actually not.
If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take my arm?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
What? Please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't address me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind
May I help you?
does not mean I'm deaf.
I don't know. I think he said he was going to come.
Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath, relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, ladies. How are you?
Hello. And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi, would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Alice.
Right.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human.
There's no need to be awkward.
Okay, so I thought that video would be a really fun way to start our training for today, since we're going to be talking about Disability and Disability 101. Once again, my name is Debbie Dietz, and I am the founder and executive director of Disability Independence Group, or DIG. We are a disability rights advocacy center in Miami, Florida. Our mission is to expand opportunities for participation, education, employment, and acceptance of persons with disabilities through advocacy, litigation, education, and training. We started our conversation during the first webinar by discussing how our society was built on the conception of able-bodied people, and I took you through a brief history of how people communicate and how communication has evolved over time. We discussed ways to make your materials accessible and how to post on social media. In this webinar, we'll be giving you an overview of disability. We're going to discuss how we define disability, what disability discrimination is. We will share some interesting disability facts with you. We will give you some disability statistics and let you know how many people in our community have a disability. We will discuss the different types of disabilities, disability etiquette, and some things that you should and should not say to people with disabilities. We will then continue our discussion by looking at how to create an accessible environment, what a reasonable accommodation is, and some common examples. We will explain effective communication, and then we will end this training with an explanation of service animals and the difference between a service animal and an emotional support animal. Please, as we said earlier, put your questions in the chat box and I will periodically answer them throughout the presentation. Today, our training will be slightly different from the first training. At DIG, we have a summer internship program with several interns that range in age from high school students to graduate students. 5 of our interns are going to be helping me present the information today. They have been working very hard on their individual sections and are very excited to be a part of this training today. You'll see their pictures on your screen, and each one will introduce themselves to you when they present. We have Nick, Ayana, Max, Claudia, and Claire.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire, and I'm an intern at Disability Independence Group this summer. I'm a senior at the University of Miami, and I'm studying psychology. So we are going to do 4 of these Did You Know slides throughout the presentation, and this is the first one. So this is an image of Gallaudet University football team, and for those of you who don't know, Gallaudet University was founded by Abraham Lincoln and is the very first deaf university in the country. It's located in Washington, D.C. So in 1884, Gallaudet University football quarterback Paul Hubbard created the huddle to prevent the opposing team from seeing the signs the Gallaudet team used to communicate their next play with their teammates. He was concerned that the other deaf teams were stealing his hand signals, so he gathered his teammates in a huddle to keep the signals a secret.
Okay, so we're going to start with the slide that you're now seeing on the screen, and we're going to look at the difference between equality and equity. So if you look at the first slide and the first picture to your left, you're going to see a baseball game. You're going to see 3 boys watching the baseball game in front of a fence. And you're going to notice that each boy has a box, and they're using the box to stand on to help see the game. And in this slide, every one of the boys is being treated equally. They're being treated the same. They each have one box the same size. But as you look and notice, you can tell that they're not having the same experience, because the first 2 boys can actually see the game with the boxes, and the third boy, even using the box, cannot see the game. So he's not getting the same experience, even though we've treated each boy the same or equally. Now look at your second slide, or the second picture in the middle. You see the same baseball game, you see the same 3 boys, you see the same wooden fence. But this time notice that the box distribution is different. The tallest boy has no boxes, he's not standing on any box. The boy in the middle has the same 1 box. And then the littlest boy now has 2 boxes. In this slide, the boys are not being treated equally, but they're being treated equitably. Now, each boy is able to enjoy the baseball game. And they're doing it by getting their individual needs met. And this is what we call requesting a reasonable accommodation, or requesting what you need in order to have the same experience as someone else. And in this slide, as I said, they're being treated equitably, but not equally. Now look at the third slide. You're going to see the same baseball game, the same 3 boys, but notice the fence is different. In this example, the fence does not have the wooden planks in front of it. It's a chain link fence that is completely, you're able to see through it. So now in this example, you see the same 3 boys, they're being treated equally and equitably, and nobody needed a box or any type of support or help to enjoy the game. And in this third slide, what you've seen is the systemic barrier, or the wooden fence, has been removed so that there is no reason that all 3 boys need any help to enjoy the game. And this is what I want you to think about while we're going through this presentation today. The middle slide is, as I said, what we call someone needing an accommodation. The shortest boy needed the accommodation of the second box to see the game. In the third slide, you have a field that was built to remove the barriers from the beginning. And that's the ultimate goal, which is what takes us back to universal design, which we talked about at the beginning of last time's presentation. And so as you're designing your programs, your services, the buildings your offices are at, think about this third picture and say, what can I do not only to make my building completely accessible with no barriers, but what can I do to design my programs and my services so that anyone can come in and enjoy them and use them without needing to request an accommodation? And that's truly the ultimate goal of where we want to be in the future.
Hi, everyone. So it's Claire again. So here are some statistics about disabilities. This is from the last U.S. Census. So the numbers are a little bit old, but they're pretty consistent with today's numbers. So as you can see, about 20% of Americans have a disability. And as we hone in on Miami-Dade County, the percentages of people with disabilities increase. So it's really, really important to inform our community about disabilities and accessibility, because 30%, almost a third of our community, has a disability. And in cities with over 100,000 people, Miami has the second highest percentage of individuals with disabilities in the entire nation. The city with the highest percentage of individuals with disabilities is Paterson, New Jersey, and theirs is 29.8%, so they're only 0.4% more than Miami. So Miami's nearly has the highest percentage. So now we're going to talk about the definition of disability. So disability is defined in many different ways by the CDC, Social Security, and there's other definitions as well. But in today's presentation, we're going to consider the ADA definition. So the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 defines disability as any physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. An impairment is considered a disability if its duration is longer than 6 months. The ADA also considers impairments to be disabilities if either the individual has a history or record of physical or mental impairment, or if the individual is perceived by others as having such an impairment. And as you can see, the 30th anniversary of the signing of the ADA is coming up this month on July 26th, because the ADA was signed July 26th, 1990. So here are some examples of major life activities. And as we just covered in the last slide, an impairment is considered a disability if it substantially limits one or more major life activities. So some examples are sleeping, breathing, learning, standing, concentrating, and thinking. And as you can see, there's many examples listed here, and not even all of the major life activities are included in this list. So here's some different types of disabilities. It's helpful to split disabilities into 4 different types. There's physical, which restricts motion or agility, and some examples are cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy. There's also developmental, which limits cognitive and or intellectual capacity, and some examples are autism spectrum disorder or Down syndrome. There's psychiatric disabilities, which conditions to produce emotional, behavioral, or mental health issues. And some examples are depressive disorders or post-traumatic stress disorder. There's also sensory disabilities, which limit sight, hearing, and other senses. And some examples are blindness and hearing loss. And as you can see, you can notice the different symbols of accessibility on the slide for each of the different types of disabilities.
Hi, my name is Claudia. I am an incoming freshman at FIU, and I will be talking to you about discrimination and visible versus invisible disabilities. We are all familiar with the concept of discrimination when it comes to race and gender, but people with disabilities are discriminated against as well, despite it looking different than what we're used to. All persons are entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of programs and services available to the public. So when a person is denied, treated differently, or segregated because of their disability, that is discrimination. But because it looks so different, we may not realize that not having Braille on the signs or that using the accessible stall in public restrooms is preventing someone with a disability from fully enjoying the services a company offers. We will be having a more in-depth look at discrimination and disability in a later webinar.
Hi everyone, it's Claire again. So this is the second fun fact, did you know slide of our presentation. So British artist Sue Austin creates multimedia, performance, and installation art using her wheelchair as a means to explore new patterns of movement. In 2012, Austin was commissioned to create a series of multimedia events as a part of that year's Cultural Olympiad, in conjunction with the 2012 Olympics and Paralympics. The result, titled Creating the Spectacle, is a spectacle immersive dance performance and underwater exploration, which was shot near Egypt by Norman Lomax of Moving Content.
Thank you. So I want to come back to disability etiquette, and I started with the video because it's one thing to see the words typed on a screen and put in a presentation, but it has much more of an impact to actually see it in a video being explained and demonstrated. And what they were really talking about was disability etiquette, do's and don'ts of what someone should do when interacting with a person with a disability. And the most important thing is to recognize individuality. Every person with a disability is different, even if the name of their disability is the same. They might need different types of accommodations, they might need different supports, and they might refer to it differently. So it's very important to recognize individuality. I always suggest when you're working with a person with a disability, always ask them what they need. Don't make a guess or assume what you think they need. And that it goes a long way, not only with being respectful to the person, but showing the person with a disability that you understand disability. As I said, you always, and you saw this in the video clearly, you have to ask before you help. Don't assume that you just because you want to help, that person needs the help you want to give them. Because you saw in the video with the door that someone tried to help and open the door, and it actually ended up making the woman trip and fall. So always ask before you help someone. You also want to use person first language, and once again, this was also in the video, because you want to see the person before you see their disability, because the disability is just one component of the entire person. So as a common way, you want to say someone is the person and then their disability. So a person that is blind, a person that is deaf, a person with cerebral palsy. However, there are exceptions to this. And because if you go back to what we said at the beginning, recognize individuality and ask, not every person identifies with person first language. And so some people put their disability first. An example is some people that are autistic call themselves an autistic person versus a person with autism. And sometimes in the deaf community, people don't use person first language. So as I said, as a general habit, you want to assume person first language, but know and understand that not everybody will want to be identified using person first language. And as the disability movement evolves and continues to expand and grow, this terminology and this language is going to continue to evolve. But where we are right now, these are the words and the language that people with disabilities want to be using. You also want to talk directly to the person with a disability. Don't talk to the sign language interpreter, and don't talk with the person that comes with the person with the disability unless they specifically tell you to do that. It's very important. It's a show of respect and a show that you understand disability and people with disability. I made you a little chart for us to look at some of the common things that you should and should not say about disability. But remember, as I just said, the terms are constantly changing and evolving, but this is where we are right now. So you do want to say the word disability instead of differently abled and challenged. And once again, certain people use different words of how they describe their disability. So I always say to a person, how would you like me to refer to your disability, or how do you describe your disability? You want to say guests or people with disabilities instead of the disabled or handicapped. You want to say that someone uses a wheelchair. You don't want to say that they're confined to a wheelchair or wheelchair bound. You want to use the word intellectual disability instead of retarded or mental retardation. We also use the word service animal or service dog instead of seeing eye dog. And that's because the use of a service animal has expanded beyond just a dog being used to help a person that is blind. We now have hearing dogs for the deaf community. We have diabetes dogs that can help someone with diabetes recognize when their blood sugar is low. There's epilepsy dogs that can sense when someone's going to have a seizure. There's dogs that help with PTSD with soldiers and veterans and help give them space and security. So we've grown and expanded beyond that original idea of a seeing eye dog. We also use the term psychiatric disability or mental illness instead of that someone's crazy or psycho or schizo. We also want to say accessible parking or restroom or family restroom versus the handicap parking or handicap restroom. Now, what's confusing sometimes and difficult sometimes is the law has not caught up with the changes in the language that we use. So in legal documents, sometimes you actually are going to see the word handicap, and you're actually going to have to use the word handicap if you're doing anything in a legal document. But you can explain to the person with a disability that I recognize this is an uncomfortable word or not a word that we use in conversation anymore. However, the law has not caught up with us, and people are working on that now. And like this year in the legislature, there were proposals to get some of that language changed. So slowly the laws and the legislation is catching up to the new language. But I always think it's important to not ignore it, but to recognize it and explain why there's maybe the use of different words sometimes. I'm getting ready to show you our second video. This is gonna, once again, kind of finish this section up and show you some more examples of the do's and don'ts that I just explained to you.
Hi, I'm Michelle and I've got cerebral palsy. Sometimes the first time people meet me, they act a bit strange. Everybody with a disability is different, but from my experience, here's a list of do's and don'ts that should help you the next time you meet somebody with a disability.
Last night.
Yeah, it was dead good, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Feeling okay there?
Why didn't you ask for yourself?
This kind of thing happens all the time. I can speak for myself. Just talk to me.
Sorry, love.
It's okay.
Oh, let's give you a hand, love.
Moving me without permission is never okay. I wouldn't pick you up and move you without asking.
And then he hasn't even texted me since yesterday.
Yeah, if my boyfriend didn't text me every couple hours, I'd get worried.
I know he's busy with college and all that, but you'd think he really would make the effort.
True.
You know, my boyfriend's awful too. He never texts back.
You've got a boyfriend?
Making assumptions is not okay. Don't assume that just because I've got a disability, I've got nothing to say. I don't mind people asking me questions, but sometimes people ask me things that are kind of inappropriate.
Do you wash yourself?
Can you drink?
Do you have sex?
Oh, do you go out?
No, I just sit at home and cry about my disability every night.
Oh yeah, my friend's in a wheelchair, so I kind of know what you're going through. What's his name again?
Don't assume that you know what I'm going through. Every case is different.
Oh, it's Kevin. Do you know him?
Oh yeah, we've got our own secret club.
You're so gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. It's a shame now
What is?
that you're disabled. What? I was trying to be nice.
No, I'm not joking. This really does happen, and it's really disrespectful. I'm not a cat. The most important thing to remember is, we're just like everybody else. Talking to somebody with a disability shouldn't be a big deal.
Hi, it's Claudia again. When it comes to disability, another important thing to keep in mind is that a person's disability can be both visible and invisible. What does this mean? A visible disability is a disability that can be easily seen, such as someone using a white cane or a wheelchair. An invisible disability is a disability that cannot easily be seen, such as PTSD, diabetes, or autism spectrum disorder. Both visible and invisible disabilities are valid and recognized by the ADA. So here's the third, did you know? The woman on this PowerPoint is Fannie Lou Hamer. Now, Fannie Lou Hamer was a woman who fought for the voting rights of Black people and women in the 1950s and in the 1960s. She and several other Black women went on to successfully register to vote in 1963. After the successful registration, they were arrested for sitting in a whites-only bus station and brutally beaten at the jailhouse, which left Fannie disabled for the rest of her life. Her most famous quote is, "I am sick and tired of being sick and tired."
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Iona Zanke, and I am a summer legal intern for Disability Independence Group. I am a rising 2L at Nova Southeastern Broad Shepherd School of Law in Fort Lauderdale. Now that we have learned a little bit about disability, what disability is, some examples and statistics, a broad overview of discrimination, and some disability etiquette, we are now transitioning into looking at how to create an accessible environment. To create full and equal treatment, an individual's environment must be created to be accessible. To ensure an accessible environment, the physicality of the space needs to meet the needs of the particular individual. This can be done by ensuring that all construction of new structures and renovations of old structures comply with ADA accessibility standards. Now you see a couple pictures on the screen. There are a couple of examples as to how to create an accessible environment. You see on the left that we have a picture of a ramp being added to a set of stairs. In the middle, we see a accessible bathroom that has appropriate handrails and space to allow adaptive equipment to enter. We have push buttons to allow people with adaptive equipment to enter buildings easier. And we also have curb cuts. Now we will transition into a video.
This gentleman is named Zach Anner. He is an actor, a comedian, and really has a point of view on disability. And this is a skit that he did in New York. And it's called The Quest for the Rainbow Bagel. So I'm going to let you watch it because it really points out issues with disability, which I think are important since this is the topic of our discussion today, but he does it with humor.
How's it going? Today we're just like, we'll do something real simple, like go and get a bagel. We've been waiting to go downstairs for about 25 minutes now. All of the elevators that have come by have been full. No, there's other elevators in this hotel, but we can't get to them because there's stairs to the elevator. Hi! I think maybe we should improvise, guys. There we go. Can we make it in this one? Hi.
Hi.
Okay. It only took an hour to get from my room to downstairs.
How can I help you today?
This film crew wants to send me on a solo New York adventure to get New York bagels.
You can get bagels anywhere.
I know. They've come up with the idea that it's best to go to Brooklyn to a place.
Bagels?
Yeah. They want the rainbow bagel in Brooklyn.
Rainbow bagel. Wow, that looks pretty though. That is a pretty bagel, I must say. Take the East Subway right to Metropolitan Avenue. And they got good bagels there, my man. Look at that.
All right.
Rainbow bagels.
I'll let you know how it is, and if it's worth the
Hey, could you bring me one back?
I will bring you one back. Yes, I will. How long are you working, Jeff?
I'll be here until 3. You gonna be back before I leave?
Well, I can try. We have less than 5 hours to go get a bagel, so let's go catch a train. Bagel Crest! Bagel Crest! See, I thought she'd be bigger, honestly, but I'm glad I saw it while I was here. Oh! I think I found it, and I scared a baby. It says Subway. There's stairs. Oh, you got a map? Awesome.
Perhaps it might be across the street.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, just hit it with some speed. Oh, I did it! New York, the city that never stops f***ing with you. What? There's f***ing more steps. If I don't find this entrance, I'm giving up on life and bagels. I see an M. There's a little wheelchair underneath the M. Ta-da! An elevator. So let's go. We're taking the A train. Da, 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 da. No one else is as excited. What are we gonna do?
We have to take a boat.
A boat? There's no accessible train. You have to take the Bagel Ferry. All in all, a pretty fun, efficient day. Bagel! I'm gonna just assume that nothing will go wrong and we'll happily get our gaggle of bagels. Whoa! There's a man named Judd waiting for me in Manhattan. So it's 1:15. We've got exactly 1 hour and 45 minutes to go and get Judd's bagel and coffee. And if we don't get it, then he's gonna be starving back at the hotel. So we've got to find out where this place is. Do you know where Rainbow Bagel is? Oh, no. Do you know where Rainbow Bagel is, sir? Do you know where Rainbow Bagel is? What the? Look at how hip that guy is. I love fair trade coffee. Isn't Whole Foods the greatest? Do you know where Rainbow Bagel is?
What?
Brooklyn has not accepted me, and this is my best outfit. Bunch of ableist hipsters, I think. That's a nice hat, though, sir.
Bagel store, the world's best bagels. That must be the one. 754 Metropolitan. When you go that way, you make a left.
Those bagels are gonna taste so good. What the fuck? It's not accessible. Let's go home.
Hey, good afternoon, boss. How you
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
I can help you today.
I need a rainbow bagel.
Anything else?
No, just the ramp. New York City is actually one of the most accessible cities in the country, and they still have a long way to go. So in order to make sure that happens, you gotta donate to places like the Cerebral Palsy Foundation and keep having the important conversations to make sure people like me can get access to whatever color bagels they want. I may have struggled getting this bagel today, but I didn't get this for me. I got this for my friend Judd. And friendship is what's really important. Oh shit, I just took a bite of Judd's bagel. I barely knew the guy, who cares?
Okay, so as you saw, he used humor to point out some not so humorous ways that that environment was not created to be accessible. Even though New York City is overall known to be considered to be an accessible city, he pointed out how it still has a long way that it still needs to go.
Okay, so this question is from Ira. She says, I understand how diabetes is an impairment. However, in most cases, it can be managed through diet, exercise, and or medication. So in general, I don't see how it rises to the level of a disability.
Okay, that's a great question. Let me try to give you an answer. If you go back, and if you want, let me share my screen and let's go back. Hold on. Let's see if we can share my screen. Here we go. Let's go back and look at the definition of disability. If you look at the definition of disability, it's an impairment to one or more major life activities that last longer than 6 months. So if you look at some examples of major life activities, diabetes can be a disability under this legal definition of the term. And a lot of people's diabetes can be controlled by medicine and exercise and diet, but not everybody's. So it would depend on the individual person and how their disability is manifested and how they're working with their disability, but it definitely can be considered a disability. All right, Sunny. Is Ira there? Do they want to ask a follow-up question?
Ira had to leave the chat, but she knows that this question an answer is being recorded. So thank you.
Okay, great. Do we have other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, does anybody want to ask a question now, raise their hand or go in the chat box before we continue on?
We did have an interesting comment from Corey.
about the, I don't know if Corey, you're on, but it was about the graphic on equity versus equality.
Yes, I'm on.
Hi, Corey.
Hi, thank you so much for this really wonderful information. I really am appreciative of it. And it just struck me that as we are designing for things, the conversation of equality versus equity is very important, but because of where we've been in our work so far, for the most part, that a lot of the conversation then goes to justice, one of justice. And so that would then, justice would ask us to consider why are the people in the picture on the other side of the fence altogether. So the other boxes show an evolution, but then that there is also a possible another step to ask what systems are in place that still continue to have the people on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, I love that. And do you have any thoughts of an answer to the question you're posing? I think it's an important question.
No, in this particular context for this series, I would definitely defer to the subject matter experts on disability around that.
Yeah, and I would say we get justice by the laws that have been passed and the implementation of those laws and the interpretation of those laws, which my office is still fighting through the court system on how do we take the laws that now, are going in the 30th anniversary of the ADA, yet you still have buildings that someone can't get in the front, literally in the front door. So how is that working? And our state is constantly trying to pass laws to give people more time to comply with the ADA, and you're thinking 30 years, right? But we're still fighting that justice battle, but my organization fights it by using the power of the law, and my lawyers go into court to really make sure that justice is being done for persons with disabilities. Currently, right now, and we're gonna talk about this more in the next training, we're in federal court right now making sure that vote by mail is accessible for people that are blind. Because right now, everybody that's fighting for vote by mail need to remember that that's not accessible for everybody and that doesn't work for everybody. So our current fight on justice is that this week in the court system.
That's super helpful. And from so then I would wonder if you or anybody else, I think that's an important point to make. From the non-legal perspective, how is it that we get justice, maybe from a social justice perspective? So for those of us who might be working in an organization and we did not have universal design prior to this, now we adopt universal design, there still may be some residual impact from the time that we did not fully embrace universal design. And how do we resolve that? How do we catch people up? How do we remove any kind of residual impact that's not legal? Now, maybe it's not a legal answer, but from a social justice perspective, how do we get justice for people who may have been marginalized because they're living with a disability, so that now we really make the culture as feel a sense of belonging?
Yes, that question is a great question. And what we do at my organization, which makes us unique, is I'm not a lawyer, not all of us are lawyers, but we take this unique perspective of the interpretation of the law and we turn it into trainings like we're doing today. And we train throughout the country on how do we teach other people, other organizations. We even work with cities and governments and businesses. How do we share what we've learned and fought for through the courts so that you don't have to do that battle? You can take what we've learned and fought for and use it and share it. And that's why we got involved with the Enable Project, because this is—
Slow down a little bit, Debbie, I'm sorry. Slow down a little bit for the interpreters, please.
Very passionate about this conversation. But this is why we joined the Enable Project. We bring our unique perspective and share it with the unique organization of Catalyst Miami that works with these organizations that might not know who we are or what we do. And we're working together to bridge that, connect and share the information. Because my attitude is there is so much work for everyone to do. If we all did one piece and shared it, we would solve so many problems instead of so many different groups working on the same part of the problem. Let's just split it up, share our information, and solve the problems. That's how I see the justice from the non-legal perspective, is we share what we're all doing. And we work collaboratively, we break those silos down.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, I just love this, and what Catalyst and this Enable project is doing is fantastic resource. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And we have 2 other partners that bring their expertise to the table too. And that's why this collaboration works. And I'm going to let Ayana pick back up and start talking.
Hey everyone, it's Iona again. Just to connect with what Debbie said earlier, I think the video is a really wonderful reminder of where we have come from, but also, again, the work that needs to be done and how important creating an accessible environment is. So just as an accessible environment contributes to creating full and equal treatment for people, so do reasonable accommodations or modifications. The purpose and necessity of these reasonable modifications or accommodations is to ensure equal enjoyment. They can be found in a number of different areas, including but not limited to employment, education, housing, and are especially important for state and local government services, programs, activities, as well as public venues. Some examples of accommodations or modifications that could possibly be requested when a particular activity, program, or service is being put on is an American Sign Language interpreter, captions on an oral presentation, and an accommodation I would ask for as an electric wheelchair user is something like a ramp. Now, it's really important to remember that these are only a handful of accommodations or modifications you will see, but they are not an exclusive list. What is so important about these reasonable accommodations modifications is that they are highly personalized to what they are accommodating or modifying for and to the individual itself. As no 2 individuals are alike, no 2 accommodations are as well. The key to embracing and thinking about how to encourage more inclusive policies and procedures is to be open to adapting and learning new information as you meet each individual who asks you for an accommodation. The goal here really is to provide anything that will level the playing field, much like the picture we saw earlier, so that the individual is able to have an equitable opportunity to participate in whatever activity, program, or service is being presented or put on. Thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to our next presenter who will continue the conversation.
Thank you, Iona, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nicholas Rick Tornado, another intern here at Disability Independence Group and a second-year law student at the University of Miami. I'll be giving common examples of accommodations for different types of disabilities, but first it's important to remember that the necessary accommodation to provide is decided in each individual circumstance with each individual person requesting the accommodation. The Americans with Disabilities Act regulations strongly encourage collaboration with the person with the disability to determine the best accommodation for that individual. First, with common examples of common accommodations for physical disabilities. And like Iona said, this is not by any means an exclusive list. These are just some examples. They include accessible parking spaces with a clear path of travel into the facility, doorways and pathways free from obstacles with easy access and that are at least 36 inches wide to provide for wheelchair use, and accessible bathrooms with grab bars and adequate turning room. Some examples of common accommodations for persons with visual disabilities include audio taped, braille, or electronically formatted materials and information, accessible websites and computer access, verbal descriptions of visual aids, braille signs and auditory warning signals in the facility, and proper service dog policies, which my colleague Max will discuss in a moment. Some common accommodations provided to deaf people are access to certified American Sign Language interpreters, televisions equipped with closed captioning capabilities, video entry systems to permit deaf people to enter secured building entrances, and again, proper policies that allow trained hearing dogs into the facility. Finally, some examples of common accommodations provided to persons with developmental disabilities are materials that use pictures, symbols, or diagrams instead of words, information provided in written and or audio formats, line guides to identify or highlight one line of text at a time, and allowing verbal responses instead of written responses. As an example from my personal life, my girlfriend's 10-year-old sister is a person with dyslexia. On her exams, she's provided with more time to read and complete reading comprehension exams, an assistant to read her math questions out loud to her, and a scribe for writing portions of exams to physically write down her answer that she verbally gives the scribe. Additionally, the phrase effective communication is incredibly important when providing accommodations to persons with disabilities. The accommodation provided must provide effective communication to the person with the disability. As defined by our courts, in order to provide effective communication, the accommodation must provide two-way communication. The person with the disability must be able to both receive...
I'm sorry, could you just slow down a little bit for the interpreters, please?
Yes, my apologies.
Thank you, no worries.
I'll go back to the start of this first section here. As defined by our courts, in order to provide effective communication, the accommodation must provide two-way communication. The person with the disability must be able to both receive communication and give communication back. The Americans with Disabilities Act regulations also include an obligation to provide effective communication to companions who are individuals with disabilities. And again, the ADA regulations strongly encourage collaboration with the person with the disability to determine the best accommodation to provide effective communication for that individual. Thank you all again for attending and listening. I'll now send it over to Max for more information.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, my name is Max. I'm a second-year law student at Florida State University. Today I'll be talking about service animals and emotional support animals. First, we're going to start with service animals. A service animal is defined by the ADA as only a dog or miniature horse. It can go to any public accommodation, anywhere that serves food, or state or local government facility. Next, please. As someone comes to your organization with a service animal, by law, you and your staff can only ask two questions. One, is this dog a service animal required because of a disability? And two, what work has this animal been trained to do? That's it, nothing else. You can't ask for a demonstration or documentation, nor can you inquire into the nature of a person's disability. Also, if it's obvious, you don't need to ask these questions. For example, with mobility impairment or guide dogs. Next, please. What else should you know? First, there is no such thing as an official license or registry for a service animal. If someone says otherwise, they're trying to sell you something. Second, there can't be a surcharge for having a service animal, but the person can be charged if the animal causes actual damages. You can't charge a pet cleaning fee. You cannot charge a pet cleaning fee, but can charge to clean a carpet if the dog peed on it. A service animal must always be under the control of its user. For example, it must be on a leash, listen to its person, and not bark or jump. A service animal can only be barred if it is a direct threat to others or requires a fundamental alteration to the facility. An example of a fundamental alteration would be at a wildlife park or open zoo, where the animals roam around free, and the alteration would be locking up the animals so the service dog can go through. Next, please. Now on to emotional support animals. Emotional support animals, or ESAs, are not pets. They are like medications that a person takes to mitigate the effect of a disability by providing emotional support, companionship, and comfort. Like medications, ESAs are prescribed by medical or mental health professionals. ESAs are only allowed in the home and on planes because they are allowed by the Fair Housing Act and the Air Carrier Access Act, unlike the ADA, which governs all public accommodations and government facilities. There is also no such thing as an official license or registry for emotional support animals. If someone says otherwise, they're trying to sell you something. Like service animals, the ESA cannot be a direct threat. Also, they can't be unreasonable. Still, unusual animals can be ESAs. Dick has represented clients using everything from a Maine Coon cat to a Barbados black-bellied sheep. Recently, we had a case involving an emotional support duck. It's on the slide on the far right. The person is named Vane, and that is the duck Prima Donna. Basically, as long as there's a nexus between the animal and the disability, and the animal is not a direct threat or unreasonable, it is allowed under the Fair Housing Act. Thank you.
Hi, it's Claudia again, and this is our fourth and final Did You Know slide. In this image, there is a man with a guide dog. His name is Don Galloway. Donald Don Galloway was a disability rights activist who had gone completely blind by the time he was 16 due to an injury that caused severe nervous damage to both eyes. He not only advocated for disability rights and worked with the ADA, but also sued the Washington, D.C. district government after being turned away for jury duty on account of his blindness. His victory in that suit made it so that blind people could not be automatically excluded from a jury. He was a key player in the early days of the independent living movement and a valuable connection between the disability and free-thinking movements in Oakland, California. He also advocated for the independent living movement to be more inclusive of people of color, successfully challenged discriminatory laws that barred people with disabilities from serving as employees in the United States Foreign Service, and was appointed the first blind person to serve as a Peace Corps director in Jamaica, where he was responsible for the placement and support of 160 volunteers. In this particular photo, he's walking with Ed Roberts, who was another important disability rights figurehead. They're on the campus of Berkeley in California, where they both met for the first time. Ed Roberts was actually the person who introduced Don to the independent living movement. And he did this by inviting him to work at the Center for Independent Living, where they worked together for about 4 years.
All right, thank you, Claudia. We're now at the point where we can take questions, but I want to skip ahead to questions to let each of the 4 organizations introduce themselves again. And one of ours is a Center for Independent Living, which Claudia was referring to in that last slide. This is our Center for Independent Living of South Florida. We have them all over the state and throughout the nation. I don't know if anyone wants to say anything this time.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, we are all over. Thank you for joining us. The last slide that you shared was about independent living, and that's really our philosophy. Consumer first, consumer driven. All of our peers in our disability community, we connect with them, and whatever they need, we help them out. I won't take any more time, but these are our contact information. Come see us, and we will have a conversation. Thank you.
And they have a great social media presence and put a lot of events online. So if you follow them on social media, you'll get to hear about some fun projects. You guys have a fun movie project coming up. Do you have the information?
We do.
It's really special.
Thank you. Yes, we do. It's actually posted on our Facebook. It's called Listen Courageously. Basically, the importance of listening to each other to break those barriers. So please, yes, it's free. It's open to everyone. I encourage all of you that are participating in this webinar to check us out and have that conversation with us. It's on the 24th, which is a Friday, I believe. And yeah, all the details are on our Facebook account. Please look us up, Center for Independent Living. Thank you, Debbie.
Awesome. Absolutely.
It's from Adina. She says, I thought ESAs were allowed in places as long as food isn't being served. Are people allowed to ask for their illness as it relates to ESAs?
Let me try to answer the question. I don't 100% understand the second sentence, but it's very confusing. There's different laws. So you've got the Americans with Disabilities Act, which only covers service animals. And service animals are allowed anywhere that people go, like Max explained. Emotional support animals are not covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So they're not allowed anywhere. They're only covered by the Fair Housing Act and the Air Carrier Access Act, which is why they can be where people live and travel on airplanes. So you cannot have an emotional support animal in a public location, whether it serves food or not. It is against, it's not covered. Emotional support animals are not covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm not sure I understand the second sentence. Are people allowed to ask for their illness as it relates to ESAs?
Yeah, I'm happy to help clarify.
Yeah, you mean to prove they have a disability?
Yeah, like for instance, if you're on an aircraft and somebody asks you what your ailment is that a question that they are allowed to ask?
It depends on who the someone is. There's specific rules, so it could be in the airport, and the people in the airport that work for the airport can ask you, and they're getting stricter and stricter, and a lot of times you have to pre-sign up and pre-fill out forms to do that, but the guest sitting next to you has no right to ask you, but the people that work for the airport or the airline can ask you, and a lot of times you do have to register in advance and have documentation. We promote something almost like a pet passport that allows that. They have that in Europe. They don't do it in America, but that's something that we're advocating for all the time to try to get rid of some of this miscommunication. Because as Max said, there is no registry. People pay money online all the time and get a piece of paper through the internet, and it's not real. You've been tricked and it's fake. Just like they're doing now to not wear masks. There's these fake cards going around. It's the same thing with emotional support animals, service animals, there's facility dogs, all these different terms. There is no legal registration or way to prove that you have that. And also, you don't need to professionally have them trained. You can self-train your animal, and that's okay under the law. And the animal only has to do one task that helps the person with the disability. But as Max said, there does have to be this connection and this nexus between the person with disability and the animal. Does that answer your question, Adina?
Totally. Thank you.
Okay, good. It's so confusing. And one last thing to make it even more confusing, this is federal laws we're talking about. We also have a state statute that mirrors the federal law, but there's a penalty if you basically lie or not tell the truth or have a fake animal. A business could call the police and that person can get in trouble. The law goes both ways. So you can report someone discriminating against you under state law, but someone can also report you if you're not being honest or truthful. But you have to be very careful if you report it, because you have to know for sure that someone's not telling the truth. And if either side does it, there can be a fine in community service hours, and that's a state statute that we have.
Go ahead.
She wrote, thank you for answering a question earlier. Thank you for the answer on diabetes as disability. My partner is a type 1 diabetic. He eats very healthy. He is at a healthy weight and exercises daily and still needs insulin. It's a huge misconception that diabetes can be resolved. She's right, and there's different forms of diabetes, type 1, type 2, and she's right. We've had a lot of issues with this in school and camp settings with children, and facilities not wanting to have to administer insulin to children or test their blood level. And we've actually had to go into court before to represent children with diabetes. So it does happen, and she's right, yes.
Okay, I am curious about the disability statistics that was displayed on the slides earlier. Did that come from the census? If so, did Miami or the state of Florida perform their own census to validate the statistics?
The data that we presented today is from the US Census. It was done at a national level. I believe Florida does keep its own statistics, but we just use these national statistics. I like to use these because what it shows is that the state of Florida in general has a higher level of persons with disabilities. Miami-Dade County, the number goes up, and in the city of Miami, it goes up even more. So the reason I show it and why I think it's important is because this is not just something of these people. We're talking 25%, 1/3 of our community identify as a person with a disability. And I would tell you the numbers are higher, but based on these census numbers, this is something that we can't hide from and that we need to realize and address is important in our community, so that we really do need to make our materials accessible. We need to be welcoming, we need to be open, and we need to be encouraging persons with disabilities to be involved because the numbers are very high. So that's why I show the statistics. It's just to give that conception that these are big numbers, but they're big in our community. And it's very important that we not ignore or not address persons with disabilities in the work that we do. I hope that helps clarify, Mark.
Yes, that helps.
Okay, thank you. And I always try to have everybody, on one of the slides that Ayana was speaking about, there was a sentence that had accessibility language that you should put on every flyer, every event that you have. And in our last webinar, we're gonna spend the whole time talking about how to make your events accessible. And I say that starts with the advertising of it in advance so that there's time to make sure there are ASL interpreters, language interpreters, captioning, large print, whatever might be needed. And I always think that if you put that language on your flyer, you're letting persons with disabilities know that you acknowledge them and want them to come to your event. So we had it on that slide, and we're going to continue that conversation through the rest of the trainings. But it's really important to include everybody, I think, because you get a fuller picture of your community and the needs of the community.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, and I'll keep talking while we're waiting. So right now we've got a lot going on with COVID-19 in our community, especially in our community, in our state, our organization. All the organizations are doing a lot around this, but if you see something going on that doesn't look right or is concerning to you or doesn't make sense, you can always send us an email or reach out to our organization, because we are working on COVID-19 because it impacts persons with disabilities, people getting sick. So we are actively watching and concerned about what is going on in our state and our community about this. We're doing a lot around education, very concerned about students with disabilities and the amount of, you've heard the term COVID slide. It's going to be even more severe for students that had IEPs and had trouble with school being virtual and distance learning. So we are working on all of those issues right now, trying to ensure that people with disabilities are not forgotten in these messages and in the work work that's being done around COVID-19. So it's important work, and any information any of you have that we can help with or bring it to our attention, that's great. We're also working against people who are trying to use disability to not wear masks. We've taken a pretty strong stance on that. And what we're telling people is if you truly can't wear a mask because of your disability and you must leave your house to go out, get a letter from your doctor. The same thing for any type of disability or a service animal, emotional support animal. Get a letter from your doctor showing or telling why you have a disability and why you can't wear a mask, and carry it with you, because people are trying to use the laws incorrectly. And as people who advocate for persons with disabilities, we are truly trying to make sure that people don't take advantage of laws that are meant for people that really need them. So we're here, we're trying, we're fighting tirelessly in our organization to make sure that people don't abuse the laws that people have worked so hard and fought so hard for.
Thank you, Debbie. We have a couple of comments here. Today's session was really informative, says Joanne. Mark says, agreed, I stumbled on the Enable Access series after the first webinar, so I missed that one, but glad to join this one. I look forward to the rest of the series. Thank you for making it accessible with ASL interpreters. Michelle says, I appreciate your accessible webinars and the work that goes into it. Thank you. Stephanie, to everyone, thank you for presenting this specific topic. It was a reminder of why we do this work, especially on the days when it's not that easy.
Absolutely, and I see this COVID as a reset to, we might not have been completely accessible, but now that we're all learning how to do things new, there's no reason not to think through that universal design lens. And you're building from scratch programs and how to do programs. Don't forget the disability lens. It's part of all of these conversations and should be. And your conversations, your arguments, everything will be much richer if this voice is at your tables. So that's why we're doing this, and I will constantly preach in a polite, respectful way. Don't forget disability, bring it in. Any issue that someone's working on, persons with disabilities, it will impact them too. Housing, all these eviction rules, COVID, hurricane preparation. Your voice will grow stronger and louder by bringing people with disabilities in, and it's really important, which is why we're taking the time to do this and share our knowledge with you. And we're always here as a resource to help you, not criticize or point out what you're doing wrong, but help you and make sure you can do it right and have the resources you need to be successful. Thank you so much for your time today. And thanks all my interns. You guys did awesome presenting. Thank you.